let's just enjoy this. Welcome back to Fuel Up Classic. Now, if you've watched my channel before, you will know by now that I love a British classic. And what I love even more is a bargain British classic. And in the world of Jaguar E-Types, it appears that 11 inches makes all the difference. And I'll get onto that a little bit later in the video because it's very, very important to understand. But nonetheless, Jaguar E-Type prices, I'm sure, as you're all aware at home, if you get the classic car magazines like I do, you flick through, there's always an array of them for sale at some pretty scary numbers at times. 100,000, sometimes 200,000 pounds plus for the very best examples. And for many, owning a Jaguar E-Type is a dream come true. But it's so hard at those kind of prices to not immediately think they're unobtainable now. But the subject of this video is to show you that even now you can still, with a little bit of compromise, and I will get onto what those compromises really mean a little bit later, you can still get behind the wheel of your very own Jaguar E-Type for sensible money. Now, this particular car is a Series 1.5 2+2. But if I told you that you could get behind the wheel of this very car for circa £40,000 in a running and driving state, ready to enjoy, ready to use, but also to improve as you go along, I think we've got to take a look at that sort of price. Let's dig down a little bit deeper, have a look at what you get for your money, and you can define at home whether you think it's still a bargain or not. Because I certainly think it still looks the part, it certainly still drives the part, and when I see them all at 100, 150,000 pounds plus, I can't help but thinking that this particular one is a bit of a bargain. So I think it's best we get this out the way early on in the video. I alluded to it in the introduction, 11 inches makes all the difference in the E-Type world. And what I mean by that, if you haven't spotted it already, this particular car is a 2+2 configuration. And when they designed this model of E-Type, they lengthened the wheelbase by 9 inches and they raised the roofline by 2 inches. And now, E-Type aficionados will walk away at this point and say they're simply just not as pretty, not as desirable as some of those early fixed head coupes and roadsters that came before. But what I say to you in that is, yes, arguably it may look slightly different to another E-Type, but also to the average person on the street, an E-Type is still an E-Type. And the price difference can sometimes be 2 to 3 times the amount because of it. So I think for that reason alone, it's worthy of close consideration. But let's not forget, and I also alluded to this in the introduction, entry-level E-Type ownership at this kind of price point is going to come with a couple of other compromises. And in this particular example, I think it's really, really good to point them out to you. This one's got an automatic gearbox. That's not going to please everybody. But actually, as we'll find out a little bit later, it really suits the character of this particular type of E-Type, or at least I think. And of course, you don't have such lovely, dainty, beautiful features such as the early Series 1 E-Types that have the covered headlights. And of course, that profile that's just been so synonymous with probably the most beautiful 1960s car ever made. So they're your kind of main sticking points, and ones that help explain why this particular model of E-Type has lagged behind in terms of value. But just to put a positive spin on it, as I mentioned, by far the most obtainable in terms of a price point, but also the most usable, and in this configuration, the most comfortable. So when it comes to actually owning and driving an E-Type, this could be a little bit of an undiscovered gem. Nonetheless, they're the compromises, they're the things that you should be aware of as to why it's not up there at the 100, 200,000 pound mark. But I think it's more important we take a closer look at this particular car and see what you get for your money. We've briefly discussed what you don't get for your money at entry-level E-Type prices, but more importantly, let's discuss what you do get for your money, because this is the business end of E-Types, and this is the bit that I think we all need to see. So lift up this beautiful, long sculptured bonnet, and under there is one of Jaguar's finest. And wouldn't it be nice if car manufacturers today still made engine bays like this? There's no plastic covering things up. There's no ECUs to go wrong. This is pure mechanical engineering. And this 4.2 litre double overhead camshaft Jaguar 6-cylinder engine is an absolute peach. It served many years of great service on many different Jaguar models. And it's got a true racing pedigree as well. And that will reflect in the driving experience. We are going to take this car out for a spin very shortly, but we've got to look at the business end of things. And not only that, when you lift up this huge bonnet, you get to see how an E-Type is constructed as well. Everything's kind of on show. It's pretty amazing, really. This particular car has had a recent minor recommissioning. It's been off the road for a long time. So from a safety point of view, brakes, rubber hoses, all of those sorts of things have been tinkered with and changed where necessary. And that's important to know, I think, because some of these cars do sit around for a long time and they don't like to be neglected. But 4.2 litre on this, as I mentioned, triple carb fed. That means performance out of the production line was about 265 brake horsepower. And it's worth noting that USA spec cars, slightly less powerful, comes from an era where emissions were starting to get pretty tight over in the United States, and manufacturers over here were desperately trying to appease them. And what that usually meant is the carbs and that they use strangled the power. And that is the case with this particular model of E-Type. A USA spec car will be fed by twin Zenith carburetors as standard, and that means about a 20 brake horsepower reduction in power over a triple carb fed UK spec car. Just worth noting if you are in the market for an E-Type. Nonetheless, this is the business end of things. Everything's on display. You could spend a good few weekends polishing, painting and improving this engine bay, no doubt, but there's nothing to hide here. It's all there. What a fantastic sight to see. But let's move on to the interior, because the 2+2 is quite interesting in there as well. And after that, we're going to take it out for a drive. So open that sculptured E-Type door, and inside, well, it's 60s Jaguar business as usual. And what that means is plenty of leather, nice little chrome features, toggle switches, and of course those big in-your-face dials and a lovely wood-rimmed steering wheel to get hold of. But in 2+2 configuration, you do get quite a bit more space in this setup of car. Those back seats are genuinely usable, but more than likely you probably find yourself using them as additional space to put a couple of weekend bags in the back. But the boot itself is also really rather good. That huge rear door, side hinged, is quite the thing to open. But I don't think that you're going to feel shortchanged by what's on offer here. It's got all those lovely 1960s sports car features. This one, of course, the leather is very patinaed. It is a car that, as I keep saying, to use and improve. But that's the whole subject of this video. It's all about getting on the first step of the ladder of E-Type ownership. And with that in mind, I do think these 2+2s as well are some of the best and most comfortable E-Types to drive. And with that in mind, I think we've got to take it out for a little drive now and see how it performs. So it doesn't matter what E-Type you drive, you are treated to the same view no matter what price point of E-Type. And sit in this cabin, look out over the steering wheel at that beautiful long sculptured bonnet, and it's impossible not to feel good. It's one of the very, very best things about E-Types in general. But let's just start this one up. A little bit of choke on a day like today, and we'll get underway. As I said, that 6-cylinder engine on the button starts up nice and smooth, fills the cabin with a nice little exhaust note as well. We'll let everything warm up, and let's go out for a drive on some of my favorite country roads and see what an E-Type is all about. So you step into the cabin of an E-Type Jag and you sort of maneuver yourself in. You've got this big steering wheel that you've got to get your legs under, and the tunnel down here is pretty narrow, even though we have only got 2 pedals on this one, of course. Nonetheless, once you're in, it's a nice, comfortable place to be. Surprisingly light and airy, and I guess that extra 2 inches of headroom really adds to that. This particular car has got a Webasto sunroof as well, but as I mentioned, this car's been off the road for a little while and hasn't been used much, so I daren't open it for fear of not being able to get it closed again. But I imagine on a nice sunny day, that's almost the perfect halfway house between owning a Roadster and a coupe. Nonetheless, the first thing you'll notice when you get into an E-Type of this era is the lack of power steering. At very slow speeds, there's no denying it's heavy, but once you get underway, it does weight up very nicely, and it's really not that hard to drive at all. In fact, I would say the automatic gearbox is surprisingly pleasant. I thought it might sap all the fun out of E-Type, you know, driving, but don't get me wrong, I'd love to be hustling down a road with a manual gearbox in one of these and looking out over that bonnet and just really being in absolute fantasy classic car land. But I'm still in an E-Type Jaguar, I'm still looking at exactly the same view, I'm just not having to change gear. That's the only difference that comes with it, really. And I imagine, I'm not an expert on the gearboxes they used on E-Types, but I imagine it's some form of Borg-Warner variant, tried and tested. I can't really tell when it shifts between first, second and third, so it's surprisingly smooth for a gearbox of the late 1960s. And nonetheless, it kind of all adds up to this Grand Tourer feel that this car's got. Once we're warmed up a little bit more, we will press a little bit harder. We will see what that 4.2 litre straight 6 has got going for it. But at the moment, we're just letting everything circulate. Let it warm through, as you should with any old car. I'm just going to savour the experience, because it's not every day you get to spend some time behind the wheel of an E-Type, and it doesn't matter whether it costs 40 grand or 140 grand, it's still a special experience. But now we're coming out of the speed controlled zone, let's just press a little bit harder. The road opens up a little bit here. Say 4.2 litre, 265 brake horsepower on tap. I'm sure some of that fun is sapped away through the auto gearbox, but nonetheless, we're approaching 60 miles an hour now, feeding it through. It's holding on lovely. In fact, it's actually very, very easy to control. I reckon I could steer this with just 2 fingers if I really needed to. And the road dips here. There we go. Handled that pretty nicely, no bottoming out or anything like that. Coming into a couple of little twisty turns. But it's funny because instinctively my left leg is going to change to press the clutch every time, but of course there's no need to do so, and the engine is more than torquey enough to just keep on the power. We were very close to a pigeon there if you didn't pick that one up. But this is still a very fun car. You can have a bit of fun with this, but let's ease things back a little bit. We're not going silly today. This is still a lovely old classic car, and it as always, should be treated with respect. But it will settle down quite nicely and just waft along. You've got that pleasing exhaust note going on. A lovely view, as I mentioned, that louvered bonnet. It's such a great view. And actually it's pretty refined. I'd say it holds the road better than an early XJS, which is a bit of a wallowy old thing. The E-Type's a little bit more composed, a little bit more sporting, but nonetheless you could cover some good mileage in this and not feel, you know, really drained. It's not a hard car to drive, which is a pleasant experience because it's an old car now. Let's just see what it's like if we swing it round here. Yeah, heavy old steering, and also not particularly good when it comes to the turning circle. We'll try that again here because this is a tight little corner. Oh yeah, will we get round in one? Oh, just about. So surprisingly, turning circle not as good as I first thought, but I suppose it is quite a long car really. Nonetheless, I'll stop talking for a while now and let's just enjoy this. There we go, just pretty much exploring the 60-mile-an-hour speed limit there. We were just a touch under, and you can have a lot of fun. You don't have to go silly with it, and why would you? It's a pleasant driving experience. We'll just check the brakes because this series of E-Type did have updated brakes over the original. If you've ever driven an early E-Type in standard format, the brakes weren't the best. Nonetheless, on these later 4.2s, they pull up really quite nicely. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Recent brake rebuild on this as well, so actually inspires a little bit of confidence. So there you have it. I don't see any reason why you couldn't have 2 adults, 2 children, a boot full of luggage, go away for the weekend, take it up to Scotland, hustle it around some lovely country roads, get admiring glances wherever you go. And even in the last sort of half an hour that we've been out with this car, we've had a couple of thumbs up and waves. Almost everyone recognises an E-Type, and almost everybody loves an E-Type. It is a 60s icon. So there we go. If you thought you couldn't pick up an E-Type for sensible money anymore, well, as I've mentioned, you can. It might not be the most desirable, it might not be the most perfect example out there, but if you just want to get behind the wheel of an experienced one, they're still out there, they're still available. And of course, being an E-Type Jaguar, it's one of the best supported classics out there. There's great clubs, there's great parts suppliers, there's lots of information about using and improving these cars. So you can have a lot of fun with it. It's not going to be a daunting prospect. And I can tell you this as well, a properly sorted E-Type will not cost you an absolute fortune to run. They shared so many different components with the Jaguar saloons of the era that there isn't really anything bar bodywork restoration that is eye-wateringly expensive with an E-Type. In fact, they're really not too bad at all. So there you have it. I'm going to go and have a little bit more fun with this car now, but I just wanted to show you it. It's a little breakaway probably from the norm of the videos that we show, but we've got plenty more classics coming up very, very soon. And after a little break away from videos, I'm glad to be back, and what a way to come back with a Jaguar E-Type.